Here to discuss is Utah Republican Senator Mike Lee, an author of a great new book called The Freedom Agenda: Why a Balanced Budget Amendment is Necessary to Restore Constitutional Government. Senator Lee, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you, Judge.
All right, it doesn't look as though the chances for a balanced budget amendment receiving a two-thirds vote in both houses of Congress and disseminated to the states for ratification is going to happen. Has that changed the view of Mike Lee about how he will vote when it comes time to raise the debt ceiling?
No, I remain committed to the idea that I've stated all along, which is I will oppose any debt limit increase that isn't accompanied or preceded by a balanced budget amendment passing.
Do you think that the chances of it passing are gone? I mean, the president is against it. I realize he's not part of the amendment process. The Democratic leadership is against it. It can't be passed with Republican votes alone. I know that virtually every Republican senator supports it, in large measure because they respect your good work, and in large measure because they'd like to see this as part of the Constitution. But honestly, do you think that this is going to happen, and that it's going to happen before you vote on whether or not to raise the debt ceiling?
Well, we certainly suffered a significant setback last week when, after the Republican-controlled House of Representatives passed the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, which tied these two things together, the Senate tabled it under the leadership of Reid. They said, we're not even willing to allow this thing to come up for a vote, to allow it to be publicly debated, discussed, and subjected to amendments on the floor. So once that happened, we suffered a serious setback. I continue to believe, Judge, that we could get this done if only it were allowed to be debated, discussed, and as necessary, amended on the floor of the Senate. Because we'll continue to make our push that we're not willing to support a debt limit increase, and we'll continue to fight it, unless, of course, they pass a balanced budget amendment first. The choice is theirs. They can have our opposition or our cooperation, but if they continue to shut this down, they will have our opposition.
All right, tell me how this will work, Senator Lee. Let's say that the balanced budget amendment is not passed by two-thirds of the Senate, and let's say it comes time to vote on some kind of a deal which would raise the debt ceiling, let the government go out and borrow trillions more without capping its spending and without requiring a balanced budget. Will you and other senators do all in your power, including filibuster, to prevent the government from doing this?
I will use every tool at my disposal, including the one you mentioned, if necessary, in order to fight it.
And do you think that there will be a sufficient number of senators who will support you? I guess it would take 41, which is not even all of the Republicans, to continue the filibuster or to prevent this debt ceiling increase from coming to the floor of the Senate, just as the Democrats prevented the balanced budget amendment from coming to the floor of the Senate.
Right. Yeah, and the answer to your question depends upon how constituents react over the next few days, what kind of messages they send to their senators. I intend to do that now. Senators are understandably hesitant to reveal in advance of any particular debate what procedural tools they might put on the table. I've been reluctant to do that as well.
Right.
My inclination is to use any and every tool, including the filibuster rule, if necessary, in order to oppose it. And I'm encouraging all of my Republican colleagues who feel the same way I do to do that.
One of your Republican colleagues, Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, has introduced legislation along with Congressman Tom McClintock of California in the House, which would require the government to pay its bondholders first, stated differently, to restore or retain the full faith and credit of the government of the United States of America. What are the chances of that becoming law as a way to ease the concerns, whether they're legitimate or politically hyped, but concerns nevertheless of those who fear default or who fear the market might anticipate a default by the federal government to its bondholders?
Well, I think it has a very good chance of passing, particularly in the House, because it exposes the folly of the argument that says failure to raise the debt limit by August 2nd necessarily means default. Default, as I see it, means failure of the United States government to honor its debt obligations as required by Section 4 of the 14th Amendment. This does not require a default if we fail to raise the debt limit by August 2nd. It simply means that we'll have to make sure that our debt service obligations are paid first, with the less than 10% of the money coming in each month that would be required for that purpose. That's why I support Senator Toomey's legislation, and I'm encouraging all of my colleagues to support it as well.
What can you tell us about this idea that Senator Harry Reid floated over the weekend? And to be candid with you and to those watching us now, I have not read about this. I've just been told about it by others who've read about it. The formation of something called a super Congress or a super committee, some super committee of 12 super people from the House and from the Senate that would decide whether or not the debt ceiling is to go up, and if so, by how much. And each House of Congress couldn't amend this or even debate it. They could only vote yes or no. Where the heck is that in the Constitution?
Well, it's not, and that's exactly the problem, Judge. I mean, look, the Constitution says that we already have two commissions, which, by the way, happen to be bipartisan commissions. One's called the Senate, and one is called the House. One of the reasons I wrote the Freedom Agenda, my book, is to explain that there's a public accountability problem associated with the expansion of government. And this idea of transferring the authority, the duty to propose cuts from an elected Congress to a bipartisan commission that would operate in secret under cover of darkness, is that it interferes with accountability. But Congress holds itself accountable when it requires itself to balance its own budget,
right,
and when it debates and discusses things in open, because then people can be elected out of office if they make bad decisions. What this bipartisan commission plan could do, I fear, is, first of all, nothing, as 17 previous bipartisan spending commissions have done in the past. But perhaps even worse, it could arrange for what I refer to as a pre-cooked package that could be presented to Congress, almost as if Congress is a rubber stamp. That's offensive to the Constitution, and it's offensive to the idea of liberty.
And it could make those arrangements in secret. Senator Lee, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this more as this crazy week comes upon us. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you, Judge.